There's a type of mother who devours her children's souls while believing she's nurturing them. She can't love without possessing, can't give without expecting something in return, can't exist without draining the vital energy of those she should protect. And the most unsettling part of it all? She genuinely believes she's a good mother. The narcissistic mother is one of the most complex and devastating figures in family dynamics. She's not just a difficult or demanding person. She's an emotional black hole that turns motherhood into a battlefield where the child always loses, always sacrifices, always gives pieces of themselves to maintain family peace. Carl Jung taught us that the shadow is everything we deny within ourselves, and the narcissistic mother lives entirely in denial of her own shadow, projecting her deepest wounds onto her children. She uses them as distorted mirrors of her own unresolved pain. But here's the truth that will change how you see this dynamic. The narcissistic mother isn't strong. She isn't powerful. She isn't invincible. In fact, she's profoundly fragile, and her greatest weapons are, in reality, her greatest weaknesses. And when you understand these weaknesses, when you can see them clearly, something within you awakens. Something she tried to kill but never completely managed to destroy. Are you ready to look into the mirror of truth? Because what you're about to discover about the narcissistic mother's weaknesses will free the wounded child who still lives inside you. Pause for a moment and look within. How many times have you felt small in her presence? How many times have you swallowed your own needs to avoid awakening her maternal fury? How many times have you become invisible, erased yourself, transformed into what she wanted you to be, just to gain a crumb of approval? If you grew up with a narcissistic mother, you know this intimate dance of fear. You learned to read the micro-expressions of rage on her face. You developed hypersensitive emotional radars to detect when she was about to explode. You became an expert in emotionally managing an adult who should have been caring for you, but instead turned you into her emotional caretaker. Do you recognize this pain? The pain of never being good enough, of never getting it right, of always being wrong, always being blamed, always carrying the weight of her emotional instability. The pain of being treated as an extension of her, like a doll that exists to reflect the perfect image she wants to project to the world. As you carry this guilt, she feeds on your suffering. As you believe you are the problem, she maintains control. As you try to be perfect for her, you deny yourself. But something within you knows this isn't love. Something within you always knew that true love doesn't hurt, doesn't humiliate, doesn't diminish. This inner voice is your true self trying to awaken you. It's the part of you she never managed to completely break. You are not responsible for her traumas. You are not born to heal your mother's wounds. You are not the mirror where she needs to see herself as perfect. You are a complete human being, entitled to your own journey, your own emotions, your own dreams. And today you will understand exactly why she acts this way. You will discover the 3 weaknesses she hides behind her mask of superiority. And when you see these weaknesses, something will change forever within you. To understand the narcissistic mother's weaknesses, we first need to comprehend what truly happens in her psyche. Jung taught us that all narcissism is at its core an unhealed abandonment wound. The narcissistic mother failed to develop what he called the archetypal maternal function, the ability to nurture without devouring, to love without possessing. Imagine the psyche as a garden. A healthy psyche has fertile soil where different plants can grow. Compassion, empathy, genuine generosity. But the narcissistic psyche is like contaminated soil, where only one plant can survive. The desperate need for external validation. The narcissistic mother lives in a constant state of emotional hunger. She's like a black hole that needs to suck the vital energy from everything around her to feel real, to feel important, to feel loved. And her children, being closer and more vulnerable, become the primary sources of narcissistic supply. She can't see her children as separate beings from herself. To her, they are extensions of herself, reflections of her own grandiosity or failure. When her child shines, she appropriates the glow. When her child suffers, she feels personally attacked. This dynamic creates what Jung would call a negative mother complex in the child. The child learns that their sole function is to serve the mother's emotional needs, denying their own needs and developing a false persona to survive. But here's what the narcissistic mother never wants you to discover. All this apparent strength, all this emotional domination, all this ability to make you feel small, is built upon a foundation of deep weaknesses. She isn't powerful, She's desperate, and her greatest weapons are signs of her greatest limitations. The narcissistic mother's first weakness is the most devastating of all. She is completely incapable of unconditional love. She can't love without demanding something in return. She can't give without expecting a payoff. She can't exist in a relationship where she isn't the absolute center. Observe how she loves. Her love always comes with invisible conditions, with emotional contracts you never signed, but are forced to fulfill. She loves you when you make her feel special. She loves you when you reflect the perfect image she wants to project. She loves you when you deny your own needs to meet hers. But the moment you demonstrate independence, the moment you express a different opinion, the moment you simply exist as a separate being from her, her love evaporates. And in place of love comes punishment, guilt, manipulation, emotional abandonment. This inability to love unconditionally reveals her deepest weakness. She cannot genuinely connect with another human being. Every relationship she has is a transaction. Every affection is a bargaining chip. Every tenderness hides an expectation. Jung would say she lives trapped in the most primitive phase of emotional development, where the ego has not yet managed to separate from the external world. She cannot recognize the otherness of others because she hasn't developed a solid sense of self. That's why she constantly needs external validation. That's why she turns her children into extensions of herself. That's why she can't genuinely celebrate her children's achievements unless they directly reflect on her. This is the most painful truth about the narcissistic mother. She never loved you for who you are. She loved the version of you that served her needs. And when you understand this, when you truly absorb this reality, something within you stops trying to win a love that was never real. The second weakness is equally devastating. She has an absolute terror of abandonment, yet she creates the very conditions that lead to abandonment. It's a perfect self-fulfilling prophecy, a cycle of self-sabotage she cannot break. Observe the patterns. She suffocates her children with control and manipulation because she fears losing them. But the more she controls, the more they pull away. The more she manipulates, the less trust they place in her. The more she invades their emotional boundaries, the more they build internal walls to protect themselves. And when her children inevitably start to pull away, whether physically or emotionally, she interprets this as confirmation of her worst beliefs about herself. I knew no one truly loved me. I knew everyone abandons me. I knew I wasn't good enough. But she never manages to connect her toxic behavior with her children's distancing. For her, the problem is never her. The problem is her ungrateful, selfish, cruel children. The responsibility always lies outside of her. The narcissistic mother's third and most devastating weakness is the one that reveals the full fragility of her psychic structure. She is completely dependent on external perception to maintain her sanity. Without the constant validation and admiration of others, she simply crumbles. This explains why she's obsessed with appearances, why she needs the entire family to be perfect in the eyes of the world, why she cannot tolerate any behavior from her children that might compromise the image she wants to project. The narcissistic mother lives in constant terror that someone will discover who she truly is behind the mask. She knows, on some deep, unconscious level, that her personality is a fragile construct. She knows that if people see her true face, the insecurity, the neediness, the emotional void, they will leave. That's why she so fiercely attacks any attempt by her children to set boundaries or to tell the truth about what happens within the home. To her, her children's honesty is an existential threat. If they speak about the emotional abuse, about the manipulation, about the toxic control, her entire facade crumbles. Jung would describe this as a split between persona and shadow so extreme that the person loses contact with their authentic self. The narcissistic mother is so identified with the perfect mask she's constructed that she can no longer distinguish between who she truly is and who she pretends to be. This external dependence is her greatest weakness, because it means she never developed internal resources to deal with conflicts, criticisms, or challenges. She lacks a solid core from which to draw strength. Her entire sense of worth comes from outside, which makes her extremely vulnerable. That's why she reacts with such emotional violence when confronted. That's why she uses gaslighting tactics when questioned. That's why she plays the victim when her children try to set boundaries. She lacks the internal psychic structure to cope with anything that threatens the perfect narrative she's constructed about herself. And here's the cruelest irony. While she desperately tries to control how others see her, she completely loses control over her own inner life. She becomes a slave to external opinions, a prisoner of an image she must maintain at all costs. Now that you know the narcissistic mother's 3 fundamental weaknesses, how do you use this knowledge to heal? How do you transform this understanding into liberation? The first step is what Jung called differentiation. You need to learn to separate who you truly are from the projections she placed upon you. Grab a journal and start writing about your true nature, your true desires, your true opinions. Not the ones she approved or rejected, but your own. Ask your inner child, what would you like to do if you weren't afraid of her reaction? Who would you be if you didn't constantly need to please? What are your dreams you never dared to express? The second step is to establish internal boundaries. You cannot control her behavior, but you can control how much emotional space you give to her opinions and manipulations. When she tries to blame you for her emotions, take a deep breath and remind yourself, I am not responsible for my mother's feelings. Practice what Jung called non-identification. When she attacks your character, when she tries to diminish you, when she uses manipulation tactics, remind yourself, this is her shadow being projected onto me. This has nothing to do with who I truly am. The third step is to develop your own internal source of validation. For years, you learned to seek external approval because that's what the family dynamic demanded. Now you need to learn to approve of yourself, to validate yourself, to love yourself unconditionally. Start a daily self-compassion ritual. Look in the mirror and tell yourself, I accept myself completely, with all my imperfections. I am worthy of love simply by existing. I don't need to be perfect to deserve affection. You are no longer the helpless child who needed her approval to survive. You are now the conscious observer of your own story. You've seen through the masks. You've recognized the weaknesses behind the apparent strength. You've understood that the problem was never you. The narcissistic mother may have planted seeds of doubt about your worth, but you have the power to uproot those seeds and plant others. You can choose to believe in your own goodness. You can choose to honor your own needs. You can choose to love yourself in a way she never managed to love you. You no longer need to carry the responsibility for her feelings. You no longer need to erase yourself to maintain peace. You no longer need to be perfect to deserve to exist. You are free to be imperfectly human, gloriously flawed, authentically you. The healing journey isn't about forgiving or forgetting. It's about integration. It's about recognizing that your experience with her, however painful it may have been, also gave you extraordinary tools: emotional sensitivity, capacity for empathy,